Hello, Jay here. I want to make sure that everyone knows I'll be starting my next teacher training group in January 2023. It's a year-long journey and a yoga training that for me is really a return to the way that I learned yoga and became a teacher. And I think people like me who learned yoga and became teachers before the advent of standardized yoga teacher training. It's not about arbitrary hoops that you have to jump through. It's about relationship and co-creation, relationship to ourselves, relationship to teachers, relationship to students. And in that spirit, as a way of sharing with you more about the program, I've recorded a series of mini talks with people who are currently participating. Today, I'm talking with Charlene.
Hey, how are you, Jay?
I'm doing pretty good. How about yourself?
I'm good.
Well, I have to say, to be perfectly honest, I'm thinking back to when we started in January, even before, like in December or November, when people were deciding to do the training.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, you were one of the people who I was a little bit intimidated, maybe, or not intimidated, but like you had a bunch of questions and you'll have to remind me, I forgot what it was, but you were finishing like an academic degree or a project that you were working on.
I was doing my master's.
Right.
I was doing a second master's.
A second master's degree, exactly. And I guess, but you also had a background in Montessori education, right? You're a Montessori teacher, is that correct?
Right. I have a background in chemistry and biology with a minor in secondary education. And then I have my master's in business and my Montessori certificate. And I was just working on another master's. Yep.
Okay. So you just listed all of that. And to me, that was potentially a little bit intimidating. But had we met or practiced together before we started the training?
No, we haven't. I did on one of your videos, it was the gentle is the new advanced.
The workshop.
The workshop. And that was what I did. So that's the way that I knew you. And the gentle is the new advanced really stood out at me because I had just finished my 200 yoga training with, that alignment. What's it? Iyengar.
I see. Alignment-based training?
Yeah, it was not good in terms of my body, my wrist. I mean, I'm a little bit older now than when I first started doing yoga and stuff, and my wrists and joints and stuff were beginning to hurt. And I know that the intensity of that program accelerated that. So I was looking for something less intense and definitely, just more gentle. So
I see. And what were the aspects of the training that were most helpful to you, or what were the parts that you found most useful?
I love the flexibility because this training is not the only thing I'm doing, of course. So I was not only doing the masters when I started, I also, run and direct and teach at the Montessori school. And I was also involved in something called Landmark. I don't know if you know about Landmark Worldwide. It's a professional and personal development program.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the three major things that I was involved in addition to your program. And all of it really was in search of what you're trying to get to, which is this inner awareness and having people develop this practice so that they can learn more about themselves, discover what their role is in their place in the universe. And a lot of it really aligns with Montessori and the adult version of Montessori, which I can see in Landmark as well. So I tend to be a very stubborn person, and I need a few programs to validate each other so that I can say to myself, okay, I know I know that this is what it is I need, but I just can't do with one person telling me. I need several different sources to be guiding me along the same path. And that's actually what has happened. The yoga, the landmark training has been the two biggest sources that's guided me along this path that I am, this quest that I'm looking on, which you haven't asked about, but it is a quest that I'm searching, that I want.
A quest. I mean, that is what I'm asking about. I mean, I really, yes, a quest. I like the word quest rather than like striving, like we're on a quest. That feels like an adventure. I like that. I like the feeling of that. But what I really appreciate is one of the ideas I had going into doing this training and kind of going against the grain in terms of how a lot of other people I know how are doing their trainings. And you said you like the flexibility of it, but I remember I was reading about different educational models, like, Waldorf and Montessori, and like what they're doing in Finland, and how the kids don't have to do homework and they get to decide what they want to learn and stuff. And I was thinking how, to me, in my experience of practicing and learning yoga, that educational model fit more rather than some tight structured curriculum that we have to follow in a linear way. So to your point about this like deeper quest or inquiry, if it's going to be like that, and if it wants to be about a more transformational kind of education experience, then it sort of needs to have room for each person to have to find it for themselves from within and bring it to the table rather than just follow along with a lead.
But not only that, it's the developing of this routine where eventually you don't have to think about it. Then you can have a somatic experience with what it is you're about. And a lot of that is the method of Montessori. It's the philosophy of Montessori. And so, I don't know, should I go on or continue?
Yes, please go on. What was the next thought?
No, I was just getting on my quest, but we can talk about that after. But
no, I want to hear that. I mean, if you want to share it, you don't have to, but if you want to share it, you can. I'm curious because if that's where you were going, I'm curious where you were about to go.
So I have this amazing way that I interact with children in my voice or in the way that I approach them. They immediately just want to follow, right? And I have been on this quest to figure out why this works. I started with the 200 hour yoga thinking that I can learn a little bit more about how that works, and that didn't help. I did the masters. I did contemplative meditation, just on and on, trying to figure out, why does this work? I don't understand why it works. You and Landmark are both hitting on the same points, which is there is something that occurs between two people. This space that happens, that occurs when two people are genuinely and authentically together, that things get created. And that's where I finally found what it is I was looking for. And I understand that there's a reason why this works. It's just it's not random.
And there's actually things that you were doing very naturally, probably, that were helping to facilitate it.
Yes.
Well, I guess the other thing that I would ask you about is, now that we are kind of close to wrapping up, I guess there's like 2 months left here. Are there still lingering questions? What is your general impressions of having done the training?
The training was perfect for me at my point in my life. I'm thinking if I was a younger, goal-seeking, strength training person, I don't know if it would have served me at that time in my life. I know it serves me now. I again, like I said, enjoy the flexibility because I am up to so many things. When I say up to so many things, my hands are in so many other people's lives. And we spoke about this already, that I did not want this to be a priority. I wanted it to be a program that supported me so that I can be effective in the other areas of my life. And that's what this did.
That's what yoga's supposed to do, I think.
Well, that's what exactly. And that was what I wanted it to do. I didn't want it to be this program where I had to spend 3 hours, I didn't want another 200 program. I didn't want that. I also found the value in doing a year-long program because, looking at the analogy with Montessori, learning how to really understand yourself before you can teach a child how to understand themselves is very vital. So we go out in the world, teachers go out in the world teaching people how to do things, and we don't even know shit about ourselves. Sorry about the language. But
no, it's okay. This is my show. You can say whatever you want.
We don't know ourselves. And we train these teachers to go out there to teach children, and the teachers don't know who they are and what their boundaries are and what they can do within their boundaries. And then we expect them to go out and teach people. And I don't even know, what about teaching do we teach to be a human being? A lot of it is not. Zero. We don't teach to be human beings. A lot of that is where my root is. My root is I'm very passionate about teaching young children how to be the best human being that they could be.
Well, I feel the same way about adults and kids and yoga. And I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much, Charlene, for what you brought to the training. I really feel like you've helped me bring my best self to the training through your discernment, and I really value that. So thank you so much.
Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for accepting me into the program.
Oh, really, my pleasure. And we still have a little time, so I'll see you, okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, take care. Bye, Charlene.
Okay, bye.
All right, here we are. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. Welcome if you're new today. All the rest of y'all, what's up? How are you feeling? Maybe we could all take a moment right now to stop. If you're like driving your car, do what you could do. But if you could take a moment right now to drop in and just see, how does your body feel right now? What's your pain level like? If you had to put a number on your pain level from 1 to 10, what's your pain right now? Those of you who've been around know I've been talking about pain in my right hip, which I've been managing for many years, but recently decided that I wanted some outside perspectives. I wanted some scientific lenses to look through. I just felt like my own tools don't seem to be working as well as they used to. So I finally went to my doctor, and in order to get my insurance company to pay for an MRI, she had to first prescribe me 5 weeks of physical therapy. I just finished that course of physical therapy, and I'll tell you more about it on the other side of today's talk, because I think that today's talk will add some interesting perspectives for me to talk about it from. But just to say this, traditional physical therapy was not able to get to the bottom or address my pain. And I certainly still have some inquiring to do. I am meeting with the ortho doctor this week, and we'll see what he says now that I finished the physical therapy. But in the meantime, I've been exploring several other avenues in the form of talks that I recorded for the show that are going to be coming to you over the next few weeks, including today's talk with Esther Gokhale. Esther is the creator of the Gokhale Method, and she does what she sometimes refers to as anthropologically informed posture work. And it has a central idea that she calls the J-shaped spine. And if you're wondering what that means, so did I. And we'll hear from Esther today what she means by that and get a general idea about what she's doing. It's certainly got my mind going on a lot of different things, especially coming out of this recent experience with physical therapy. It expands possibilities for sure. And like I said, it just gives us a lot to think about. It was a great pleasure to have this moment to meet Esther, and I'm glad to be sharing our conversation with you today. Real quick before we get to it, I want to express some gratitude for our podcast premium subscribers. I specifically want to thank Carla Crane and Paul Lang. Shout out to you, Carla and Paul. Really appreciate you. If you're new to the show, the most recent 52 episodes are always part of our public feed. We also have a podcast premium subscription where you can access the full archives and also help support the show, because really, it's the way that independent media like this survives. It's choose your rate. You cancel at any time. And if you don't have any money right now and there's an old episode that you want to listen to, just email us. We'll definitely hook you up. But if you have a little something to give, it makes a huge difference. And we're grateful to everyone who does that. To learn more about becoming a podcast premium subscriber or find any of my other stuff, go to jbrownyoga.com. All right, y'all. Like I said, I will touch base with you on the other side. But for now, let's go ahead and get to it. Let's listen to this conversation that I had with Esther Gokhale. Hello?
Hi there.
Hi, is this Esther?
It is. How are you?
I'm okay, Esther. I'm Jay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
I've already started recording, and if it's okay, I would like to consider us having just begun.
Let's go for it.
Cool. Well, I'm so excited to talk to you, Esther. It's really a pleasure. I don't know if the person who set this up between us, I didn't have someone who set it up for us, mentioned it to you, but even just to share with anybody who might listen to this later, the reason that you're here is because someone who listens to this show named Alex reached out to me after a recent episode I had with someone named Libby Hensley. And Libby and I had a conversation about hypermobility syndrome disorders.
Yeah.
And she emailed me after listening to that episode, and she enjoyed it. And then she said, in a somewhat kind of like, I don't know, inviting kind of way, obscure way, she didn't really expand upon it. She just said, I think you should talk to Esther Gokhale and ask her about the difference between a J-shaped spine and an S-shaped spine. And she just left that on the table there like that. And so I went to your website, and within like 10 to 15 minutes, my mind was reeling a little bit on a couple of things. I got to be honest. It's very interesting. I've been really trying a lot of the things out. I've been seeing if I can fire my glute and stretch my psoas with each step for like the last day and a half and stuff.
Wow. I'm impressed that you got that far just from looking at my website. Do you have my book?
I watched some other stuff and watched some interviews and saw where you gave a little lesson in some of these things. So you kind of gave me some starting points to play with before we got a chance to talk.
Good.
Well, I guess I am very intrigued and interested to talk about, it's not just J and S, it's C-shaped spine, S-shaped spine, and J-shaped spines.
And even an I-shaped spine.
Oh, I didn't even know about that one. We can get to it.
There's a blog post somewhere on the website that asks people whether they're a C, S, J, or I.
Okay.
I is when people sort of collapse into themselves without a lot of extra curvature forming along the way. So it tends to be older people who've had little mini fractures and degeneration of the disc. So that's the rarer kind. The most common kinds, yes, are S and C.
Yes,
and what we try to shepherd people towards is a J spine.
Well, I would definitely want to get into some of those details because I have been playing with them and I think they're very interesting and eye-opening in a lot of ways. Before we do that, though, I would like to get, if we can, a little bit of background and context for how you came to these ideas yourself and how you kind of developed the method that you have, that you made. And I looked at your bio, and there's 3 points right at the top of your bio. The first one is that you grew up in India, which I'm sure would have an imprint in and of itself, because I've spent time there and just the way that people are in their bodies there was very different. They didn't have chairs and they didn't have the same toilets that I had. It was just very obvious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And my mother, being an Indophile and coming from a foreign culture, she was Dutch, she would point a lot of things out. She was very admiring. So I grew up not only surrounded by good models, but also with someone from a foreign culture pointing things out to me. So she would marvel at the vendors and at the sweeper and how they could do their work, which is pretty arduous, without any physical problems. So that was an early input. Tell me about the other 2 you saw.
Well, the next one was that you studied biochemistry at Harvard and Princeton.
Yes.
But then before you even say that, because here's my question, because the next one was that you had an acupuncture degree in San Francisco. And I thought, wow, that's a real pendulum swinging east, west to east. And I was wondering, what made you want to study biochemistry coming from that background in your childhood in India? And why didn't you become a biochemist? Why did you end up moving to acupuncture instead?
Wow, there's so much to say about that. My mother used to take care of abandoned orphans, abandoned babies and orphans. And I saw pretty amazing things happen under her care. She was an RN, by training, but she was raising 4 kids in India. And somewhere along the way, she decided she did not want us to become spoiled brats. And she took care of all these orphans, and we were recruited to tote them around and feed them and, sing to them. And she did the heavy duty things like have them sleep on her chest and nurse them out of their various ailments. She always got the most sick infants because of her background. So I had this idea that amazing things can happen in unusual ways, because she used, of course, TLC, but also all kinds of little interventions and nature and therapies and massage and dietary things. And, so I witnessed a lot of things that were pretty impressive, and some of them not meant to happen, out of the scope of normal expectations. And so I had the idea that I would do something like that. And, but I wanted a good grounding in science. And so when I went, my application to Harvard actually said I wanted to do research in alternative medicine, and that was before it was fashionable to do so. So I have to give them credit for taking me anyway. And it just, I like science. I find it to be a very good beginning point, and then I like foraying from there into observation, into conjecturing things, into looking at cultures, which it's kind of a long running experiment, right? And so my mother had already tuned my eye to a lot of things. One of the influences you didn't mention from my website is, and it actually relates to yoga. It's one of the early students of Iyengar, that created the system Aplomb. And when I developed very serious back problems in my early adulthood, that I was looking all over for solutions. So I had tried all the conventional things, physical therapy, chiropractic, acupuncture, and so on. And I wasn't getting anywhere. And finally I had surgery, and that got me out of my agony. But the problem, the reherniated L5-S1 disc, repeated itself within a year, and I was being offered yet another surgery. In the meantime, I had discovered these different ways of working your own body. So that includes Alexander technique and Feldenkrais and Aplomb. And it made sense to me that you would work on your own body rather than, for a long-term solution, rather than look for yet more interventions, which had failed me.
Well, I was curious about this Aplomb Institute in Paris. I was not familiar with it. I guess I am curious though, because is Aplomb a very scientific approach, or it seems like it comes from a different place, or is there a through line from that original interest in a scientific lens to ending up going there? Because some of those other things that you mentioned, like physical therapy and the surgeries, are sort of what I think of as kind of like a Western medicine. Correct.
Well,
approach.
I foray all over the place, like for scouting purposes, nothing is too far out. But
whatever works.
Whatever works. But then, I always like to bring my logical, scientific filter. And, so Aplomb has, and Noel Perez having early access to Iyengar, who was really a pioneer, I would say, in the field of anthropologically informed posture work. He told Noel to go and walk behind the women in the marketplace in India. And when her shadow looks a bit like theirs, she will have learned something. And, that approach of mimicking people who have natural, good body mechanics and structure makes sense. Now, what happened with that is maybe not so systematic and not so scientifically informed. And for that reason, I felt a need, because my mission is to make back pain rare. This is what I started off with. I was in agony. I was really looking at life as a cripple. And I know what that feels like to people who are going through this. And, you need help quickly. You don't need a sort of a spiritual basis for spending the next several years of your life. You need the thing they first need is to get out of pain. And that, it turns out, can be done very efficiently and very effectively. And that's what I've dedicated my life to doing. Like, how can we help people get out of not only their back pain, but their neck pains and their foot problems, their plantar fasciitis and their bunions. And it turns out this restructuring the body is good for all kinds of musculoskeletal issues. And then, perhaps not so surprisingly, some physiological and psychological issues too.
Well, it all seems connected to me. And it's interesting to me what you said about Iyengar and his instruction to this person from Aplomb, because I think you call it primal posture, right? That's sometimes how you refer to it. And It's intriguing to me that the instruction was just observe people from whatever, another culture, an indigenous culture who's moving through the world in a certain way. And learning from that, because that is a very different thing than most of the people who listen to this show, who are all like avid yoga people who studied Iyengar method. They weren't given the instruction of go observe somebody who just moves in the world like that. We got like a standardized set of instructions of like anatomical cueings that, when I said to you, and we're already to this spine stuff, we're already there, because when I said my mind was reeling,
Yeah.
Because I think I came to yoga was probably very common, like a more C-shaped spine. And let's kind of explain to people what you mean by a C-shaped spine.
C-shaped spine would include a tucked pelvis and a correspondingly rounded upper body, like all the way above, so the upper lumbar spine, the thoracic spine, maybe the neck would all be convex, kyphotic. That would be a really extreme C. Now, most people correct that, with correct in quotes, by arching the back, arching the neck, arching various places. And then that can become an S spine.
Right.
Yeah?
Right. Well, I think the C shape, as I kind of was understanding it from listening to other things that you've said and reading some things, a lot of that is very deeply ingrained in us. Like you show the picture of the way we hold our babies. I have a friend named Amy Matthews who works specifically with babies and helping babies have a more natural movement progression.
We do work with people of all ages, 100-year-olds and babies. But with the babies, we have their parents come in and we show parents how to hold and sit and guide the babies. And we strongly encourage the parents to learn how to be in their own bodies, to set a good example, and to then have a much better chance of giving good directions. Because the standard directions, the conventional directions of sit up straight, pull your shoulders back, are really ineffective and counterproductive, actually.
Well, yes, I found that to be true. Now, what I think is very interesting is I think a lot of those patternings in our spines are very ingrained into the furniture. Like you show the picture of the baby in the car seat,
Mm-hmm.
and then I actually came to yoga not for physical reasons, more like my mom died and it was like other psycho-spiritual reasons, I think.
Yes.
But when I started practicing, I became very aware of how lack of mobility I had in my body and how tight it was. And yoga became like this vehicle. And a lot of the early instruction, which did come out of what we were taught as like Iyengar alignment principles, were these shoulders back and down. And what really felt to me like an attempt to create length in the spine. They always talk about lengthening the spine, or like an axial extension, trying to undo the curves in a way. And I think that how I went about doing that, like the kind of exertion that went into trying to maintain an idea about that I don't think was a good idea, caused all kinds of issues for me, like persistent pain issues that I've been unraveling for like the last 20 years. That's what I developed my whole career on gentle yoga practice to kind of undo some of that stuff. But I guess what the confusion for me is, I was taught to do this thing that was about what felt like flattening out my spine, and that caused problems. So more recently, it's been about restoring curves in my spine. But then you're talking about a flattening it out. And so I'm a little confused.
Well, the devil's in the details, right? Yes. There's some curves that want to be flattened out and there's some that want to be formed. And it's all about having the right curves. And, who's to say what that is? And I think the approach that we use, which is look at populations that don't have problems with their backs and feet and hips and so on. So there are three populations that we use as models. The first is ancestral populations. If you go to your local museum and you look at Greek statues and old paintings, the people are very distinctively differently arranged. Shoulders are back and the necks are tall and the chins are angled down and the behinds are behind. I joke to my students sometimes, it's called a behind for a reason. It's meant to be out behind. When that phrase was coined, people knew where this part belonged. And so that is a curve you do want. At L5S1 specifically, you want your behind. That's what allows the rest of the spine to stack relatively flat. It's not fully flat by any means, but it's not nearly as curvy-wurvy as modern anatomy books would have us believe, as ergonomic chairs would have us think our back is supposed to be shaped, and so on. So that curve is a natural one. And if you look at any young child, which brings me to the second model population, that would be all children, young children, before they're acculturated, before they've had a chance to copy our structure, they have their behinds behind and the rest stacks. And it's rare that I do podcasts. Usually when I'm talking about my work, I share screen and show images. I would have shown a young child and it would be very clear that this young child has a J spine. So I'm going to invite all your listeners to come visit us and listen to a video.
Yeah, I'll put a link in the description. I saw it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I have 2 children, so I remember observing their posture. Yeah.
Yes. And then the third model group is indigenous people or village cultures, pre and non-industrial cultures, where people have had to live by their bodies, which keeps you honest in your body, and also where people have grown up amongst people with good posture. You know, it takes a village. And so if you are in the same village and your grandmother is bending over the fields, hip hinging, and your grandfather has a nice J spine, then you're getting influenced by that. And also these kinesthetic ways, wise ways, get passed down. There's an unbroken chain of kinesthetic wisdom that passes down in these village cultures and cultures that stay in place in a way. Whereas what's happened in modern times is we transplant ourselves all over the map, and then we lose some of our natural ways. You know, we leave them behind. We improvise. We start creating furniture that isn't really corresponding to our natural curves, that doesn't have space for the behind to be behind. You know, it's kind of shut down, maybe forces a tuck like umbrella strollers would do, like most of the baby car seats do. So I blame infant furniture for setting us off on a bad path, where in the time where the brain is learning what sitting means, we're being subjected to this really poor training where our pelvis is being forced into a tuck. And so that's what we think is sitting. And then that kid who sat in an umbrella stroller or sat in a typical car seat goes to school and, not surprisingly, replicates that posture. And now everyone can see something is wrong. And what do parents and teachers maybe do? Parents mostly, you know, just call out, sit up straight. And since that doesn't work, it's a hack. It makes that C-shaped spine into an S-shaped spine, and isn't sound either. And so that doesn't last. And the kids go back. Most people go back and forth between being upright and tense, which they think is good posture. That's that S-shaped spine. And then they relax, and then they get tired or maybe sore, and then they go back to having a C-shaped spine, relaxed and slumped. And neither is good posture, and they both do damage, different kinds of damage. So this is what we have. We go back and forth and have no idea how to actually get to a place that's upright and relaxed and healthy and right for our species.
Wow. Very, again, interesting. I've been talking a lot about animism on the show and how we've removed ourselves from like a lot of the natural rhythms, even like phases of light with all the blue light that we have coming at us after the sun goes down and stuff. So this kind of ties right into that in terms of our postural ways of being kind of removed from a life, like you said, where these things would be imparted quite organically. You know, you get
the good news, because sometimes people imagine we have to go back to sticks and stones to get a good ways back. And I'm a great believer in modern phenomena like computers and access to information and so on. And it turns out that sitting behind a computer is one of the easiest things to learn to do well.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
I know, you've got the cushion. I'm doing it right now. I'm hinged from the point at the middle back. I mean, I guess before we get to that, because that is an interesting thing we can share with folks, I'm curious, this stuff that you're talking about in terms of like analyzing the way that movement patterns are in people's bodies through cultures and time. Is that what the Aplomb Institute was about?
Yeah, so definitely influenced by, Noelle was a pioneer as well in anthropologically informed posture work. She was against systematizing anything. And so it was sort of drop-in classes at the same level. And she considered that her institute was mostly a research institute. So, the motivation was maybe not scientific, so the reason to align your neck was so the cosmic rays would enter it right, that kind of thing.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm curious about, because there's both reasons to align your neck, right? There's some reasons that you could have that are more like biomechanical, and then there are other ideas that one might hold that still would potentially accomplish the same people feeling better.
Yeah. So, I mean, one can approach so many ways, right?
Yes.
For me, my background is scientific. It is logical. I am very comfortable with that as a baseline. And then people have all sorts of experiences. I have become very interested in the psychological correlates of posture there. What makes me go there is data. There are an increasing number of studies now showing it's obvious from the animal world that there's a connection between posture and emotional and mental health. How do you tell how a dog is feeling? Through its posture. And so that's been obvious. It's now very clear from fMRI studies on people's brains. You show them anxiety-provoking images, and if they have open upper body posture, it's much harder to get them anxious. If they have forward shoulder and stooped posture, it's much easier to get them anxious. So those things have made me very interested in actually mapping some of the postural things that happen in the body, distortions, restoring natural posture, and what happens with emotional health. But that is a recent interest of mine. What we are best known for is that we have become very, very good. Our teachers all over the world have become extremely good at helping people arrange their nuts and bolts in such a way that they get rid of pain.
Well, I was watching, you have these interesting wearables that you've generated. I must admit, I was like, I want my hands on one of those things, because what it looks like it gives is like some kind of like biofeedback. And I know you, in the work that you do, like in one-to-one work with people, your teachers, and you do like a lot of hands-on for that as well, like where you put your hands on people. And I'm curious because a lot of us, including myself, we were taught to basically have these S-shaped spines in a lot of yoga classes. Let's just say it. A lot of yoga classes have been instructing people to engage their bodies in a way that lead to these S-shaped spines that you're describing.
It's true, because I come from a yoga background as well, growing up in India and being sent off to yoga camps in the summer and so on. And so I was very backbendy. I was a model for one of the groups of swamis that would come to Mumbai and demo. And, I was a cute kid who could do pretty spectacular backbends, and people would clap and sign up for their classes. But I was backbending poorly, and nobody saw that. And so I had a very S-shaped spine, and I think that led to my early severe back problems. But anyway, back to you. Yes. So you were saying a lot of yoga classes do kind of encourage this S shape in the spine. Yes.
They do. And I think also I exploited like, what's the hinge point there? Was it T12 or whatever? Like, I think I've had issues just because
twists and deep back bending, just kind of exploiting that hinge point in a way that wasn't very sound, But it's interesting to me because a lot of people listening to this who might be Iyengar teachers are going to say, "Oh, we learn straight spines, flattened spines," but I don't know what I learned in Iyengar class wasn't what you're talking about with J-shaped spine. And it seems to me like it has something to do with, and maybe you can say to do with some kind of distinguishing between upper and lower lumbar spines. You were talking about having a tail, but there's a sway action that happens into that upper lumbar that we're looking to make a change in. Is that right?
Yeah, correct. That is very correct. You mentioned our wearables. We have 2 sets of wearables. We have a 5-sensor wearable that is not a consumer product. Our teachers have it, and it gets stuck on the spine. It's mostly a research tool.
If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.